The two-lane road curved through thick Pennsylvania woods, the canopy above already tinged with the burnished colors of late October. Amber leaves drifted across the windshield of Daniel Mercer's old sedan as the engine hummed steadily, carrying him deeper into the rural stretch of Cold Hollow Township. His GPS had lost signal 15 minutes earlier, but he wasn't worried. The directions he had scribbled down from the county library's online records were clear enough. Follow Route 61 until the gas station, turn onto Mill Creek Road, and keep driving until the town thinned into scattered farmhouses. The Ashwood property would be impossible to miss. Daniel had read about the house for the first time 2 weeks earlier, buried in a collection of old clippings about unresolved tragedies in Pennsylvania. The headline had been simple: family of 4 missing, Ashwood House abandoned. The year was 1978. No remains were ever found. Neighbors whispered, police gave conflicting statements, and eventually the property fell into ruin. But the rumors hadn't faded. Some said the family had fled debts. Others claimed they were victims of something unspeakable within those walls. For a freelance journalist like Daniel, stories like this were gold. He had written about abandoned asylums, long-forgotten mine collapses, even a traveling preacher who vanished with his congregation. But the Ashwood story felt different. The silence around it was heavier. As he drove, Daniel noticed how empty the countryside felt. No other cars passed him. The farmhouses were set far back from the road, with acres of harvested cornfields leaving behind brittle stalks. The sky was a dull pewter gray, thick with the promise of rain. He adjusted the collar of his jacket and reminded himself that this was why he liked such assignments: the isolation, the sense of stepping outside modern time into something raw and unsettling. At last, the road widened, and a rusted sign came into view: Ashwood Lane. The letters were faded, the metal bent, as though someone had rammed into it years ago. Daniel slowed and turned onto the gravel road. The crunch beneath his tires echoed in the stillness. The Ashwood property revealed itself gradually. First came the boundary, a low stone wall, half-collapsed, crawling with moss. Then, the trees grew denser, branches intertwining to form a tunnel of shadow. Beyond that, the house emerged, a hulking, 3-story structure with boarded windows and a roof sagging under decades of neglect. The clapboard siding was the color of soot. One shutter dangled by a single hinge, creaking when the wind shifted. Daniel parked near the gate, shut off the engine, and just sat for a moment, taking it in. He had expected ruin, but not presence. The house loomed as though it was aware of his arrival. He pulled out his phone to snap a few photos. Though the lack of service meant he couldn't post them yet, that was fine. He planned to document everything carefully, both for his article and maybe for a podcast he had been thinking of starting. The gate was chained but not locked. With a grunt, he pushed it open wide enough to slip through, dragging his duffel bag along. The air smelled of wet leaves and something else: damp wood, maybe mold. His boots crunched across the uneven path leading to the porch. Closer now, he noticed details that the distance had hidden: charred marks along one side of the foundation, as if a fire had started but never consumed the house. A series of faint handprints smeared on the porch railing, darkened by time. A carved initial H gouged into the wooden doorframe. "This is perfect," Daniel muttered, half to himself. Perfectly eerie, perfectly intact. He imagined the opening lines of his article. Already, there are houses that look abandoned, and then there are houses that look hungry. Ashwood House is the latter. He pushed open the front door. It groaned but yielded. Inside, the air was colder, almost clammy. Dust swirled in the shaft of light from the doorway, catching motes like slow-motion snow. The entry hall stretched ahead, wallpaper peeling in strips, floorboards sagging under his weight. A staircase climbed to the second floor, the banister draped with cobwebs thick as gauze. Daniel set his bag down, pulled out his flashlight, and swept the beam across the room. The furniture was still there, covered with yellowing sheets, but there, a cracked mirror leaned against the wall, reflecting his own gaunt face and tired eyes. He had driven nearly 6 hours to get here, and exhaustion pressed on him, but adrenaline was stronger. "All right, Ashwood," he whispered, clicking on his audio recorder. "Let's see what you've got." For the first hour, Daniel moved methodically through the house. He recorded his impressions aloud: the living room with its brick fireplace, blackened from use; the dining room where a long table remained set with dusty plates, as though waiting for a meal that never came; the upstairs hallway lined with family portraits, their faces blurred from water damage. He paused longest at the children's bedroom. The wallpaper was a faded pattern of balloons and circus animals, peeling at the edges. A small wooden crib leaned against one wall, its mattress sagging. On the dresser sat a stuffed rabbit, one eye missing. Daniel reached for it, then stopped. Better to photograph it untouched. He crouched, took several shots, then slowly backed away. The silence of the house was total. Not even the scurry of rodents or the flutter of birds disturbed it. Every creak of the floor seemed amplified. Daniel reminded himself that such places often felt unnatural simply because they lacked the ordinary rhythms of life. No electricity humming, no plumbing, no human presence. His mind, primed for fear, filled the gaps. Still, as dusk crept in, the unease deepened. The clouds outside thickened, swallowing the light, and shadows pulled in the corners. Daniel unpacked his sleeping bag in what he assumed had been the study, a room with heavy bookshelves and a desk coated in grime. He set up his small camping lantern and opened a can of soup, heating it on a portable stove. The smell of warm food helped. As he ate, he jotted notes in his journal. House intact, furniture untouched, evidence of fire on exterior wall. Children's room extremely unsettling. Atmosphere equals oppressive silence. Halfway through writing, a sound stopped him. It was faint, almost imagined, a soft thump from upstairs. Daniel froze, pen hovering. He waited. The house groaned, as old houses did. But then it came again, a deliberate weight on wood, like a footstep. He clicked on his recorder. His voice trembled more than he intended. First unusual noise. Sounds like movement upstairs. We'll investigate. Flashlight in hand, he climbed the staircase. Each step creaked, but beneath his own sounds, he swore he heard a whisper. A brushing noise, like fabric dragged along a wall. He shone the beam into the hallway, empty. The portraits stared back, their warped faces eerie in the light. Room by room, he searched. The children's bedroom, the master bedroom, a guest room. Nothing. Dust lay undisturbed. No footprints but his. Back in the hallway, the whisper came again, this time closer. Daniel swung the light toward the far end of the hall and froze. One of the doors, which he was certain he had left shut, now stood ajar. The darkness within seemed thicker than the rest of the house, as though it resisted the flashlight's beam. His pulse hammered. Logic told him it could be wind, a draft. Old houses shifted. Yet as he stepped forward, recorder still running, he caught something else, the faintest murmur, like a voice exhaling words he couldn't understand. He stood there for a long moment, breath held, until the lantern glow from downstairs reminded him he was still in control. He forced himself to push the door open. Inside was a narrow storage closet, empty but for a broken chair and a collapsed cardboard box. Dust covered everything. Daniel laughed shakily, the sound echoing too loud. "All right, you're jumpy, Mercer. Settle down." He closed the door firmly and returned downstairs. Yet, as he lay in his sleeping bag later, the silence pressed closer, heavier, as though the house was listening. And sometime in the night, just before sleep claimed him, he thought he heard it again. A whisper, faint and curling through the dark, coming not from upstairs, but from directly beneath the floorboards. The morning broke gray and damp, with mist crawling low across the yard. Daniel woke stiff from the floorboards beneath his sleeping bag, the faint smell of mildew clinging to his clothes. For a few seconds, he forgot where he was. Then the silence of the house pressed in, and the memories of the night, the whispers, the door, the weight of unseen presence returned. He sat up, rubbed his face, and muttered, "Coffee. I need coffee before ghosts." The portable stove sputtered as he brewed a small pot. The familiar bitterness steadied him. By daylight, the house seemed less menacing, its ruin more obvious. The dust, the sagging beams, the water stains spreading across ceilings, these were rational things. But the whisper under the floorboards lingered in his memory like a splinter. After breakfast, Daniel decided he needed context. Every good story wasn't just about what happened inside a house. It was about what the people outside said about it. And Cold Hollow, he suspected, had stories. He locked his duffel in the trunk of his car and drove back down the gravel road, grateful to escape the suffocating air of Ashwood for a while. The town was small, barely more than a main street lined with brick storefronts and faded awnings. A barber shop, a hardware store, a diner with neon letters flickering open. A few pedestrians shuffled by, bundled against the chill, their eyes flicking to Daniel's car as though recognizing a stranger immediately. He parked near the diner. The bell above the door jingled when he stepped in. The interior smelled of frying bacon and coffee strong enough to cut through fog. Vinyl booths lined the windows, and a handful of locals hunched over plates. Conversations paused briefly as Daniel entered, then resumed at a lower pitch. He slid onto a stool at the counter. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a name tag, that read Marge, approached with a pot of coffee. "Morning." Passing through, she asked, her voice neutral. "Something like that. Daniel said, offering a smile. Actually, I'm a journalist, doing a piece on local history. Thought I'd start with breakfast. Marge poured his cup, eyeing him carefully. Local history, huh? What kind? Daniel hesitated, then decided honesty might open more doors than lies. The Ashwood property. The effect was immediate. The chatter in the diner dulled. A man in a John Deere cap glanced over, then muttered something to his companion. Marge's hand froze on the coffee pot. You're wasting your time, she said finally, setting the pot down hard. Ain't nothing but bad luck up there. Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. That's exactly why I'm here. People vanish, a family disappears, those are stories worth telling. Don't you think it deserves to be remembered? Marge shook her head. Some things are better left buried. Before he could press further, a man 2 stools down spoke up. His face was weathered, his flannel shirt patched at the elbows. You're not from around here, are you? No. Philadelphia, Daniel said. Figures. Outsiders always think they can dig around and find the truth. The man sipped his coffee, then leaned closer. Let me give you a piece of advice. The Ashwood place don't want to be remembered. Folks who go poking around don't come back right. Daniel forced a light tone. You mean like ghosts? The man didn't smile. I mean like men losing their minds. 2 kids went exploring up. They're back in '94. Brothers. One's still in the state hospital. Doesn't speak a word. The other put a shotgun in his mouth the year after. The words chilled Daniel more than he expected. He opened his notebook discreetly under the counter, jotting a quick line. 94 brothers, 1 mute, 1 suicide. Marge shot the man a warning glance. Don't fill his head, Frank. Frank shrugged. He asked. Daniel decided to shift the subject before the silence grew hostile. What about records? Newspapers, police reports. I couldn't find much online. That's 'cause most of it's gone, Marge said. Fire at the county archives back in '83. Convenient, if you ask me. And papers don't print what'll drive people out of town. Daniel's reporter instincts flared. A fire that conveniently destroyed evidence. That was too neat to ignore. He finished his meal, tipped generously, and thanked them both, though neither smiled back. As he walked to his car, he felt their eyes on him until he turned the corner. The next stop was the Cold Hollow Historical Society, a squat brick building near the edge of town. Inside, shelves sagged with binders and boxes, the air thick with the smell of old paper. Behind the desk sat a librarian-like figure, a thin man in a cardigan with wire-framed glasses. He looked up as Daniel entered. Help you? I hope so, Daniel said. I'm researching the Ashwood family. I heard you might have some local records. The man's brows knitted. Ashwood House again. Every year or two, someone wanders in asking. Students, writers, thrill seekers. What are you? Journalist, Daniel said simply, offering his card. The man studied it, then sighed. I'm Harold. Most of the official files are gone, like you've probably heard. But, he rose, disappeared into a back room, and returned with a battered box. We keep clippings, oral histories, unofficial things. Don't say I didn't warn you. Daniel's pulse quickened as he opened the box. Inside were yellowed articles, handwritten notes, and even photographs. He sifted carefully. 1978, headline. Family vanishes from rural home. Photo of the Ashwood family smiling stiffly on their porch. Father, mother, 2 young children. A handwritten note. Neighbors report strange lights, sounds at night. Some claim chanting. A photo of the house taken in 1980. Windows shattered. Grass waist high. A typed sheet with witness quotes. I heard a baby crying, but there hadn't been a baby there in years. Daniel copied as much as he could into his notebook. Why keep this if the town wants it forgotten? He asked Harold. Harold adjusted his glasses. Because forgetting is impossible. The place is a scar. You don't remove a scar by pretending it isn't there. Do you believe the stories? Daniel asked. Harold hesitated. His gaze shifted toward the window, as if checking that no one was listening. I believe the house remembers. I believe people leave pieces of themselves behind. And I believe you should be careful what you ask it to show you. By the time Daniel stepped outside, the mist had thickened into drizzle. He tucked his notes into his jacket, unsettled by Harold's words. The house remembers. Driving back along the winding road, he caught sight of something that made him slow. On the edge of the woods, just before the turnoff to Ashwood Lane, stood a figure. A woman. She wore a gray coat, her hair hidden beneath a scarf. She was too far to see clearly, but she seemed to be watching him. Daniel slowed to a crawl, rolling down his window. Hey, do you need a ride? He called. The woman didn't answer. She simply turned and stepped into the trees, vanishing between the trunks. Daniel pulled over, heart pounding. He scanned the woods with his flashlight, but the undergrowth was empty. No footprints on the wet earth, no sign anyone had been there. After a long moment, he exhaled and drove on, trying to rationalize it. A hiker, maybe, or his tired eyes playing tricks. But when he reached Ashwood House and shut off the engine, the silence seemed heavier than before. The windows gaped like empty eyes, and as he pushed open the front door again, he thought of what Harold had said. The house remembers, and maybe it was already remembering him. The second evening at Ashwood House crept in faster than Daniel expected. The drizzle from town had followed him back, turning into a steady rain that slicked the gravel drive and tapped against the rotting window frames. By the time he finished unpacking his gear camera, recorder, tripod, the woods around the property had grown dark, their outlines swallowed by mist. He set up his lantern again in the study, trying to replicate the comfort of the previous night. The house smelled stronger when damp, an acrid mix of rot and something metallic. He shoved the thought aside, opened his laptop, and typed up the day's notes while the rain drummed steadily above. Every few minutes, he replayed his recordings. The whispers he had heard last night weren't captured, or if they were too faint to separate from static. That frustrated him. Proof mattered. Without it, he had nothing but his word, and words could always be dismissed as imagination. As the night deepened, the house seemed to expand. Walls groaned, rafters sighed. He tried telling himself it was weather and age, but it was impossible to ignore how intentional the sounds felt, like responses to his movements. At around 11, he decided to push further. Instead of huddling in the study, he would roam the house with his recorder running, documenting whatever came. He clipped the flashlight to his jacket and pressed record. This is Daniel Mercer. It's the second night in Ashwood House. I'm beginning a walkthrough. His boots echoed against the boards as he moved into the main hallway. He described what he saw. The water stains spreading like ink across the ceiling, the wallpaper curling from dampness, the faint draft seeping under the front door. Then came the sound, a faint tap, 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 somewhere above him. He froze, microphone raised. The tapping stopped. Possible dripping water, he whispered into the recorder. Or footsteps. He climbed the staircase slowly. Each step felt louder than the last, like the house was amplifying his intrusion. At the top, the hallway stretched into shadow. The family portraits hung crooked, their faces warped by water damage. Then, from the farthest room, came a creak. Daniel's breath caught. He forced himself forward, pulse hammering in his ears. The door to the children's bedroom stood ajar. He remembered closing it earlier that day. He pushed it open. The flashlight beam slid across the room. The crib, the peeling circus wallpaper, the stuffed rabbit, all exactly as before, except the rabbit was no longer on the dresser. It lay in the crib, propped upright, staring at him with its one remaining eye. Daniel's throat went dry. He lowered the recorder. I didn't touch that. The room smelled faintly of mildew and something sweeter, almost cloying, like spoiled milk. He backed away, pulling the door shut firmly this time. Back in the study, Daniel sat rigid, staring at his recorder. His instinct screamed at him to pack up and leave, but his journalist's pride held him there. He needed to see this through. Fear was part of the job, an occupational hazard of chasing stories no one else dared. To steady himself, he played back the audio he had just recorded. The playback was muffled at first, his own narration, the creaks of the staircase. Then came the faint tap, 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 and then something else. Between his breaths, barely audible, was a whisper. Daniel? He dropped the recorder onto the desk. His name. It had said his name. Okay, he whispered to himself. Maybe interference. Maybe radio bleed. That happens, right? But deep down he knew there were no active radio towers nearby. And his name was too precise. The rain thickened, hammering the roof. The sound became a backdrop, constant and droning. Daniel lay in his sleeping bag, lantern dimmed low. He told himself he would just rest, not sleep. Keep the recorder running. Document everything. But at some point, exhaustion pulled him under. He woke to silence. The rain had stopped. The house was utterly still, the kind of stillness that carried weight. He blinked, disoriented, and realized the lantern had gone out. Only the pale glow of moonlight seeped through the cracks in the boards. Then he heard it, a faint dragging sound. Floorboards shifting, not from above this time, but from the hallway just outside the study. Daniel sat up, heart racing. He reached for his flashlight, flicked it on, and aimed it at the doorway. The sound stopped. For a long moment, nothing. Then, the door to the study, which he had left half closed, creaked open on its own. Hello? Daniel's voice cracked. He hated how desperate it sounded. No answer, just the oppressive silence pressing back. He raised his recorder again, forcing steadiness into his tone. Unexplained movement of door. Time. Around 3 a.m. Then, very faintly, from somewhere deep in the house, came the sound of a child's laughter. High-pitched. Brief. Daniel's skin crawled. He stood, sweeping the flashlight across the room. Empty, still. The laughter seemed to linger in the air, as though the walls themselves were holding onto it. He made it through the rest of the night by sheer willpower, sitting upright in the study chair, recorder running, every muscle tense. Sleep never came again. The house looked unchanged, harmless, even. Dusty sunlight streamed through the cracks, painting the walls gold. Daniel packed his bag with trembling hands, telling himself he only needed a break, just a few hours in town to regroup. But as he shut the front door behind him, something caught his eye. On the inside of the doorframe, carved deep into the wood, was a fresh mark, not weathered like the old initials he'd seen before. New, sharp-edged, 4 letters, carved as though with a knife. Dion. The last letter unfinished, as if interrupted. Daniel staggered back, bow rising in his throat. He hadn't carved it. No one else had been there. And yet the house had written his name, just as it had whispered it in the night. Shoving his bag into the car, he drove hard down the gravel road, heart slamming. But even as he left Ashwood House behind, he couldn't shake the sense that it wasn't really behind him at all, because the house remembered, and now it knew him. Daniel didn't return to Ashwood House until late afternoon. He had spent most of the day holed up in the diner, nursing cup after cup of bitter coffee while scribbling notes with a frantic hand. Sleep-deprived, jittery, he replayed the audio again and again through his headphones, trying to convince himself he had misheard. But the whisper of his name was undeniable, and the carving on the doorframe, it hadn't been there before. He had photos from the first night to prove it. When Marge asked if he was settling in all right, he lied and said yes. He didn't tell her about the laughter, or the way the house seemed to etch itself into his life. He didn't want to give her the satisfaction of telling him to pack up and leave. By 3 o'clock, the storm clouds began to clear, sunlight breaking through in pale shafts. Daniel forced himself back into the car. He couldn't walk away now. The story was only just unfolding, and he was at its center. Ashwood House greeted him the same way it always did, looming, sagging, half asleep but watchful. He carried his bag inside, trying not to look at the doorframe where his name had been scratched. The house smelled different today. Less mildew, more smoke, as though someone had lit a fire in the hearth. Decades ago, and the air had never forgotten. Daniel decided to explore the rooms he hadn't yet examined closely. He moved methodically, photographing everything. The parlor with its moth-eaten curtains, the pantry with rusted tins still on the shelves, a cellar door that stuck so badly he decided to leave it for later. It was in the master bedroom that he found it. The bed sagged with age, the frame cracked. Drawers were pulled halfway open, as though abandoned in a hurry. Daniel tugged one completely free and set it aside, coughing at the cloud of dust. Behind the drawer, pressed flat against the back panel, was a leather-bound book. His pulse quickened. He pulled it out gently, brushing grime from the cover. The leather was cracked, the clasp rusted, but when he opened it, the pages whispered like dry leaves. It was a journal. The handwriting was neat, feminine, written in blue ink that had faded but remained legible. Inside the front cover was a name. Margaret Ashwood, 1976. Daniel carried it back to the study, set up his lantern, and began to read. The first entries were mundane. Notes about gardening, about the children Eleanor, age 6, and Peter, age 3. She wrote about her husband, Thomas, who worked long hours at the mill. The tone was affectionate, domestic, but slowly, the entries shifted. July 3, 1976. Thomas has been restless at night. He says he hears noises in the walls. I told him it's mice, but he insists it's voices. I don't want the children frightened. August 12, 1976. Eleanor asked me today why the man in the hallway doesn't speak. When I pressed her, she grew angry, said I was pretending not to see him. She wouldn't eat supper. She sat at the table staring at the doorway, waiting. Daniel's skin prickled. He turned the page with careful fingers. September 1, 1976. We wake to knocking beneath the floorboards. Always the same time, 3 in the morning. Thomas nailed the cellar shut. He says it isn't safe. He won't tell me why. October 5, 1976. The children cry at night. They say someone is whispering their names. Eleanor refuses to sleep in her bed. She says the rabbit told her it wasn't safe. God forgive me, I burned the toy in the fireplace. But in the morning it was back in the crib, smelling of smoke. Daniel sat back, shivering. He looked toward the corner of the study, where his camera bag leaned against the wall. He remembered the rabbit he'd seen, its one dark eye. He forced himself to keep reading. November 17, 1976. Thomas has grown distant. He spends hours in the cellar, though he swore never to go there again. When I ask what he does, he says he's listening. Last night I found him whispering into the cracks in the wall. The children are afraid of him. December 23, 1976. The lights in the woods again, flickering like torches. I thought I heard chanting, but when I opened the window there was only silence. Thomas says it's nothing, but he has begun carving symbols into the door frames. He says it keeps them out. Who? He will not say. The later entries grew fragmented, frantic. Words scratched over each other, ink smeared as though written
January
in a shaking 10th, hand. 1977. They are in the house. They do not leave. The children are never alone, even when I cannot see them. Eleanor says they whisper her name the way they whisper mine. Thomas won't speak to me anymore. He only listens. He only listens. The final entry stopped Daniel cold. March 2, 1977. If anyone finds this, know that we tried. We tried to love this house, to make it ours, but it does not belong to us. It belongs to them. They are beneath, always beneath, waiting. God forgive us. God forgive the children. Daniel closed the journal with shaking hands. His mouth was dry, his pulse erratic. The words felt too close, echoing his own experience, the whispers, the floorboards, the child's laughter. He wanted to stop, to pack everything, drive away, and leave Ashwood to rot. But another part of him, the reporter, the man who had always chased shadows, knew this was only the beginning. He needed to know what was in the cellar. That night, he set his lantern on the floor outside the cellar door. The wood was swollen, the handle rusted, but the nails Thomas Ashwood had hammered decades earlier were still visible. Daniel pried them loose one by one with the back of a hammer he'd found in the shed. Each nail squealed as though reluctant to leave. When at last the door was free, he gripped the handle and pulled. The smell hit him first, damp earth, mold, and something sour. He gagged, covering his mouth with his sleeve. The darkness inside was absolute, swallowing the beam of his flashlight. He hesitated, recorder in hand. Opening the cellar. Heavy odor. Possible mold contamination. Descending now. The stairs groaned under his weight as he moved downward. The air grew colder, pressing against his skin. At the bottom, the cellar stretched into shadow. Stone walls slick with moisture. Rusted shelves holding broken jars. Nothing unusual at first. Then his light caught on something in the far corner. Symbols. Carved into the stone. Circles intersecting. Jagged lines. Crude figures. Blackened at the edges, as if burned in. Daniel's stomach turned. He lifted the recorder. Markings on the foundation. Possibly ritualistic. Matches description from journal. As he spoke, a sound drifted up from beneath the floor. A whisper. Not words this time. Just breath. Long, slow, exhaling, as though the cellar itself was breathing with him. Daniel staggered back, flashlight trembling. The beam slid across the carvings again, and for an instant, he thought he saw movement. Shadows crawling between the lines, shifting, coiling. He scrambled up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and pressed his weight against it, chest heaving. The whispers rose for a moment, a chorus beneath the boards, then faded back into silence. The house was still again, but Daniel knew it was only pretending, and now he had proof. The journal in his bag was heavy as a stone.
Proof that the Ashwood family had lived with the same whispers. Proof that they had feared the cellar. Daniel couldn't shake the we. He carried it everywhere in the house, tucked into his bag like a charm against the whispers. But the words inside didn't protect him, they poisoned him. Each time he reread Margaret's entries, the air in Ashwood House grew heavier, as though the walls themselves remembered what she had confessed. Sleep became nearly impossible. He dozed for minutes at a time, only to wake to the creak of floorboards above, or the sound of breathing that wasn't his own. When he stumbled to the mirror in the bathroom, his face startled him. Eyes bloodshot, skin pale, lips cracked. He looked like a man being drained, day by day. He thought of leaving. More than once he packed his camera, his recorder, even loaded the car. But each time, he stopped at the end of the driveway, staring down the dirt road that led to the highway. Something pulled him back. Not just the story, but the sense that the house didn't want him to go. That thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like a command. Dash, dash, dash. The disturbances escalated in subtle, insidious ways. One night, as Daniel played back his recordings, he realized there were gaps, moments missing. Entire minutes cut clean, as though erased. His hand shook as he scrolled through the file list on his recorder. The timestamps didn't match. He didn't remember pressing stop. Another evening, he found his notes scattered across the study floor, the pages rearranged into neat little piles. He lived alone in that house. He hadn't touched them since the morning. And then there were the mirrors. Every reflective surface seemed wrong now. His reflection lagged a fraction of a second behind his movements, just enough to catch his eye. When he raised his hand, the figure in the glass hesitated before copying him. Sometimes, he thought its expression was off, as though it smiled when he did not. He draped a blanket over the bathroom mirror after catching it tilt its head when he hadn't moved. The breaking point came on the 7th night. Rain hammered the roof in a relentless rhythm. Daniel had set up in the study again, journal open, camera on the tripod. He was dictating notes into his recorder when the lantern sputtered. He reached to steady it and froze. The journal had flipped open. Not by his hand. The page staring up at him wasn't one he'd read before. The ink was darker, fresher, as though written yesterday instead of 40 years ago. March 5, 1977. They have chosen another. The house never lets go. The house always hungers. Asterisk. Daniel's throat closed. He ran his fingers over the page. The ink smudged under his skin. It wasn't dry. Impossible, he whispered. The lantern went out. He was left in pitch black, heart pounding, recorder still running in his hand. That's when the laughter began. Not a child's giggle this time. Deeper, male, low and wet, as though it bubbled up from the floorboards. It came from everywhere at once: the ceiling, the cellar, the walls closing in. Daniel scrambled for the lantern, smacking it until the light flared again. The room was empty, but the journal had moved. It sat now in the center of the floor, wide open. The words across its pages had changed. Daniel, asterisk, scrawled again and again, filling every line. He staggered back, knocking over the tripod. The crash echoed through the house like a gunshot. And then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, on the stairs. One by one, they creaked as though someone heavy was descending, though no figure appeared in the doorway. Daniel aimed his flashlight at the stairs, sweat stinging his eyes. Who's there? His voice cracked. Have a weapon. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in. Then, in the dark of the hallway, something whispered. Not leaving. Dash dash dash. Daniel didn't remember falling asleep. All he remembered was pacing the study until exhaustion forced him onto the couch. When he woke, dawn filtered pale and cold through the windows. The journal lay shut on the desk, exactly where he'd found it originally. For a moment he convinced himself it had been a dream. But when he checked his recorder, his blood ran cold. The tape had captured everything. His voice, frantic. The crash of the tripod. The footsteps. And the whisper. Not leaving. Asterisk. He slammed the recorder off and shoved it in his bag. The next day he drove into town, desperate for human voices. The diner was busier than usual, filled with locals who eyed him with a mixture of curiosity and pity. Marge slid him a coffee without asking. You look like hell, she said flatly. Daniel almost laughed. Thanks. You still staying out there? He hesitated. Yeah. Then you ought to leave. Something in her tone made him glance up sharply. You've heard stories, haven't you? About ASHWOOD House. The diner went quiet around him. Forks paused. Conversations stalled. All eyes were on him. Marge leaned closer. Everyone's heard stories. That place isn't right. People go in. They don't come out the same. Some don't come out at all. Like the Ashwoods. Her mouth tightened. Eat your eggs, honey. And if you're smart, you'll pack your things and go. Daniel wanted to press her, but the weight of the room stopped him. Every patron was staring as though waiting for him to defy her. He finished his coffee in silence and left. Back at ASHWOOD House, the air felt heavier than ever. He couldn't shake the sense that the locals knew more than they were saying. But it didn't matter, because leaving no longer felt possible. Each time he pictured driving away, he imagined the whispers following him, lingering in his ears, waiting for nightfall to resume. He wasn't sure if the house's hold on him was psychological or something deeper, but either way, he was trapped. That night, he sat in the study with the journal open and the recorder running. He spoke directly to the air. "What do you want from me?" Silence. He tried again, louder. "Why me?" This time, the answer came. Not through his ears, but through the recorder's playback seconds later. "Because you're listening." Asterisk. Daniel dropped the device. The lantern flickered violently, shadows crawling across the walls like living things. And then, for the first time, he felt it. Not just whispers. Not just laughter. A hand, cold and clammy, brushing across his shoulder. He spun, swinging the lantern wildly, but there was nothing there. Only the journal, open to another fresh page. The words scrawled in jagged ink. "Beneath. Come beneath. Asterisk. The cellar. Always. The cellar." The cellar door loomed in the kitchen like a wound in the house's body. Daniel had avoided it for days, always brushing past, always locking it behind him. The whispers seemed louder there, pooling in the shadows at the edges of the frame. Each time he reached for the handle, a chill crawled up his arm and tightened around his chest until he backed away. But now, the journal gave him no choice. Beneath. Come beneath. The words echoed in his head like a drumbeat. He stood in front of the door, flashlight in one hand, lantern in the other. His recorder hung from his neck, already running. "This is Daniel Reed," he whispered into the mic. His voice shook. "Time is 11:42 p.m. I'm about to enter the cellar of Ashwood House. I don't know what I'll find down there, but the journal, the whispers, everything points to it." He swallowed. His throat felt raw. "I'm doing this because I need answers. And because I don't think the house is going to let me leave until I do." His hand closed on the iron handle. The door groaned open. The stairs were steep and narrow, built of splintered wood that flexed under his weight. Damp air surged upward, carrying the smell of mold, rust, and something faintly metallic like old blood. Each step creaked as though warning him to turn back. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing rough stone walls sweating with condensation. Cobwebs stretched across corners, and something skittered out of sight when the light passed over the floor. Halfway down, the lantern flickered. "Not now," Daniel muttered, shaking it. The flame steadied, but the shadows seemed thicker, pressing close. At the bottom of the stairs, the cellar spread into a wide chamber. Low ceiling, packed dirt floor, wooden beams sagging overhead like the ribs of a carcass. And in the center, an old iron table. Daniel's breath caught. The surface was stained dark, and leather straps dangled from its corners. Beside it stood a rusted set of tools, a hammer, a saw, a collection of blades pitted with corrosion. "No," he whispered. His stomach turned. "This can't." He raised the recorder. There's a table down here. Restraints. Tools. These weren't for carpentry. This looks like." He couldn't finish the thought. The words choked him. Something moved in the shadows. Daniel spun, flashlight beam darting across the walls. Nothing. Only shelves stacked with jars clouded in yellow liquid. He stepped closer, squinting. Inside the jars floated things he couldn't immediately identify. Long bones. Curled hands, shriveled and gray. A jawbone with teeth still intact. He staggered back, gagging. His shoulder hit another shelf, sending dust billowing. A stack of papers slid free and scattered across the floor. Daniel crouched, gathering them. Old letters. Receipts. Newspaper clippings yellowed with age. One headline leapt out at him. 2 more missing in Ashwood Township. His hands shook as he skimmed the article. A young couple, vanished without a trace. Last seen walking near the Ashwood property. Another clipping. Local boy disappears. Foul play suspected. The date was 1976. Daniel's stomach clenched. Margaret's journal had entries from the same year. He flipped to another paper. This one a ledger written in Margaret's neat hand. Names and dates filled the pages. Some were crossed out. They weren't neighbors or friends. They were victims. The Ashwoods hadn't just lived in this house. They had fed it. A sudden bang echoed through the cellar. Daniel dropped the papers, heart hammering. His flashlight swept the room. The cellar door at the top of the stairs had slammed shut. He stumbled toward the steps, calling out, "Hello, who's there?" No answer. Only the sound of breathing. Not his own. Low, guttural, in the corner of the cellar. Daniel turned slowly, flashlight beam trembling. The shadows in the far walls seemed thicker, rippling like water. Something shifted within them, something large. The breathing grew louder, ragged, almost animal. Daniel's voice broke. "Stay back." He swung the lantern toward it. The flame flared, and the shadows recoiled, shrinking against the stone. For a heartbeat, Daniel saw it. A figure, tall and twisted, its face obscured, its hands long and clawed. Watching him from the dark. Then it was gone. The cellar fell silent. Daniel collapsed against the stairs, gasping. His recorder was still running, the red light blinking. He forced his voice steady. "There's something down here. I saw it. I don't know what it was, but it doesn't want me here. It doesn't want the light." He looked down at the scattered papers, the names written in Margaret's ledger. The missing townsfolk. The tools. The jars. The truth was clear now, even if he couldn't fully accept it. The Ashwoods hadn't just gone mad. They had been consumed by whatever force lived beneath this house. And now it wanted him. Daniel scrambled up the stairs, slamming his shoulder against the cellar door until it burst open. He stumbled into the kitchen, sucking in clean air as though surfacing from drowning. The journal lay waiting on the table. Its pages fluttered though there was no wind. The ink bled across the paper, forming words as he watched. "You've seen. You belong." Daniel grabbed the book, hurled it across the room. It struck the wall and fell open on the floor. From the cellar, the breathing started again. Louder this time. Closer. The night had teeth. Daniel sat in the parlor, his recorder clutched to his chest, every light in the house burning. The cellar door was locked, but the sound seeped through anyway, slow breathing, like a predator waiting. He had tried leaving. He'd packed his bag, thrown his notes into it, bolted for the front door. But when he opened it, there had been only blackness outside. Not night, not trees, not the gravel road, just a void that seemed to stretch forever. He had slammed the door shut, gasping, and when he tried again minutes later, the world had returned. The trees, the fields, the stars. But the gravel path twisted back on itself no matter how far he walked. After an hour, he had found himself standing in front of the porch again, as though the house had spun the land around him. He was trapped. The lights flickered. "Don't," Daniel whispered. "Not now, please." The bulbs buzzed, dimmed, then steadied. He pressed the recorder to his lips. "It won't let me leave. The house, it bends reality. I think I'm inside something alive. And it doesn't want me going." A knock interrupted him. Sharp, sudden. At the front door. Daniel froze. The knock came again, louder this time. He crept toward the door, each step careful, silent. His hand hovered over the knob. "Who is it?" His voice cracked. No answer. Then, faintly, a child's laugh. Daniel jerked back as though burned. "No, no, no." The laugh came again, right outside the door, joined by the sound of small feet running across the porch. Then silence. Daniel backed into the parlor, eyes wide. He barely noticed the journal lying on the floor where he had thrown it. Its pages rustled, flipping on their own. He forced himself not to look. The air thickened, hot and suffocating. The wallpaper peeled as though from sudden damp. His flashlight rolled off the table and clattered onto the floor, the beam swinging wildly. From upstairs came a crash, furniture toppling, glass shattering. Daniel flinched. No, I'm not going up there. But the sound came again, louder, closer. Footsteps pounding down the staircase. Something emerged in the hallway. At first it looked like Margaret, her photograph brought to life. A pale woman in a nightgown, hair long and black. She moved slowly, her bare feet silent on the wood. "Margaret." Daniel's voice was a thread. Her head turned toward him, but where her face should have been was only smooth, pale skin. No eyes, no mouth. Daniel staggered back. God. The figure twitched violently, then lurched forward, rushing him with a speed that seemed impossible. Daniel screamed and hurled the lantern. It smashed against the floor, flames bursting across the rug. The figure shrieked, a high, piercing sound that split his skull, and dissolved into smoke. The fire spread fast. Daniel grabbed a blanket, smothered the flames, coughing against the smoke. When he looked up, the rug was charred, the air heavy with burned fabric. The figure was gone. Daniel collapsed into a chair, trembling. His pulse thundered. His vision swam. This place, he rasped into the recorder, is eating me alive. He dropped the device. It clattered against the floor and continued recording, its red light blinking. The journal stirred again, pages fluttering, words spilling across the paper in dark, bleeding ink. You cannot resist. You are ours. Daniel snapped. He seized the book, tore at its pages, screaming as he ripped them into shreds. The paper smoked in his hands, blackening, disintegrating into ash. But the words didn't stop. They burned themselves into the walls, scrawled in jagged lines across the plaster. Ours. 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 Daniel pressed his palms against his head. Stop it. Leave me alone. The house groaned, timbers shuddering as though in laughter. The whispering returned, louder than ever, swelling from every corner. Not just one voice, hundreds. Men, women, children. Their tones overlapping, rising into a maddening chorus. Daniel fell to his knees, clutching his ears, but the sound burrowed inside anyway. He crawled toward the door, desperate to flee. The knob burned his hand, searing his palm. He yanked it open despite the pain, only to find the void again. A black, endless nothing. From the dark, shapes began to emerge. Pale hands clawing from the emptiness, reaching for him. Faces pressed against invisible glass, mouths open in soundless screams. Daniel slammed the door and stumbled back. No more, he whispered. I can't. Then he heard his own voice. Coming from the recorder. But not what he had just said. It was deeper, distorted. Stay, Daniel. Stay with us. He stared at the device, trembling. The red light blinked once. Twice. Then the recorder shut off. Silence fell. Too much silence. The cellar door creaked open. Daniel turned. His body refused to move, rooted in place. From the shadows of the stairwell, the figure emerged again. Not Margaret this time. Taller. Broader. Its face a mask of shifting darkness, its limbs grotesquely long. It crawled into the parlor, joints bending wrong, filling the space with its presence. The whispers roared. Daniel finally broke free of paralysis. He bolted up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, nearly tripping in his panic. The figure followed. He could hear the claws scraping the wood, the weight of it shaking the house. He burst into the upstairs hall, slammed the nearest door shut, and pressed his back against it. His chest heaved. The scratching came at once, nails raking the wood. Then pounding. Then silence. Daniel's eyes darted around. He had locked himself in a bedroom. Moonlight spilled through cracked curtains. The air was icy cold. In the corner stood a mirror. And in it, Daniel saw not himself but the figure, standing right behind him. Daniel's back pressed against the bedroom door, every muscle taut with fear. His eyes darted to the mirror. The figure lingered in the reflection, yet the room itself was empty. Its presence was heavier than gravity, pressing down on him, filling every corner of the house with a suffocating weight. He swallowed hard. Each breath burned. His hands shook. He realized he couldn't stay here. The house wouldn't let him. Not alive, not whole. He turned toward the staircase leading back to the cellar, a grim realization forming. The journal's words had been clear. Beneath. Come beneath. The truth, the source of the terror, was in the cellar. Always. Lighting his flashlight and gripping the recorder, Daniel forced himself down the stairs again. The air was colder than before, damp and foul, thick with the scent of decay. He tried to steady his breathing. At the bottom, the cellar appeared unchanged, yet subtly alive. Shadows shifted in corners where none had been, and the faint whispering of children and adults alike echoed in his ears. He stepped closer to the stone wall where the carvings were burned into the surface. The jagged symbols pulsed, like veins of darkness running through the rock. Then he saw it, a trapdoor, partially concealed beneath a tattered rug. His heart thumped. This was new. He hadn't seen it before. The whispers surged, insistent, like a chorus urging him forward. He knelt and lifted the trapdoor. A stairway, narrow and slick with mold, descended into blackness. No light penetrated. Daniel swallowed. He couldn't stop himself. He had to see. The stairs creaked under his weight. The whispers became clearer, forming words that chilled him to the bone. "Welcome, Daniel. We've waited. You belong." The stairway opened into a cavern-like space. The air was fetid. Dirt walls dripped moisture. And in the center, an altar. It was crude, built of stone and bone. Old bones, human, stacked in a pattern that suggested ritual. Charred remnants of candles littered the ground. The tools from the cellar above were neatly placed here, as though they had been waiting. Daniel stepped closer, eyes wide. The walls were inscribed with names. The missing from Ashwood Township, the names from Margaret's ledger, and one that made his blood freeze. Daniel Mercer. His own name. Written decades before he even arrived. The whispers became voices, loud, overlapping, echoing around the cavern. "We remember. We take what belongs to us. Stay with us." Daniel stumbled backward, nearly falling. He understood now. Ashwood House was not just haunted. It was alive in a way he couldn't rationalize. It collected, consumed. It didn't let go. The Ashwoods had tried to live there, but they had failed. The house had claimed them. Now, it wanted him. He raised the flashlight, shining it toward the altar. The bones seemed to shift, rearranging themselves subtly under the flickering beam. And then he noticed movement in the shadows. Figures humanoid, pale, twisted, their eyes hollow, emerged from the walls themselves. The room was alive with them, hundreds of forms writhing, pressing closer. He stumbled backward, screaming. He grabbed a loose piece of timber from the side of the stairwell and swung it blindly at the nearest shadow. It passed through, as though striking fog. The whispers laughed, mocking, cruel. Daniel's mind screamed. Logic failed. He couldn't reason. His only thought: survive. He turned, sprinting up the stairway, up toward the cellar door, up to the kitchen, and finally, he reached the front door. It was locked from the outside. Panic surged. He banged, pulled, shoved, nothing. The whispers rose again, a tidal wave of sound that drowned his own voice. And then, silence. Daniel sank to the floor, exhausted, trembling. His eyes scanned the room. The journal lay in the corner, open. Pages flipping violently, landing on the last entry he hadn't read yet. "We've waited. You've come. You will stay. Beneath is home. Beneath is life." He realized with a shudder that the house was not just a building. It was a predator, patient, eternal. It had fed on every soul it trapped inside, and now it hungered for him. He heard a sound behind him. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Something larger, heavier. The air shifted, pulling at him. He screamed and threw himself at the nearest window. It shattered under his weight. Rain poured in, freezing, driving him out into the mud and gravel. He ran. Not toward the town, not toward safety. He didn't know if anywhere was safe. He ran blindly through the woods, soaked, slipping on roots and rocks. Behind him, faint laughter drifted through the trees, carried by the wind. He didn't stop until dawn, until exhaustion forced him into a shallow depression in the forest. He collapsed, shaking, the rain still running down his face. When he awoke, it was quiet. The sun broke through the mist. The town of Cold Hollow appeared in the distance. He had made it. But as he looked back toward the road that led to Ashwood House, he realized something terrifying. The trees had shifted. The road was gone. Only forest stretched endlessly. No one would believe him. The police, the neighbors. They would dismiss him as a man lost in the woods, traumatized, hallucinating. And perhaps he was. But he knew what he had seen. He knew what waited beneath that house. Daniel left Cold Hollow the next morning. He never returned. Yet sometimes, late at night, when he closed his eyes, he could still hear it. The whispers of Ashwood House. Calling his name. Waiting. Claiming. For the house never forgets. And it never releases what it has marked.